Hello everybody, and welcome again to the Epic Flight Academy in beautiful New Smyrna Beach, Florida. This is the Private Pilot Ground School course, and my name is Mike Thompson. Now, to be successful in Epic's Private Pilot course is going to involve three things. First of all, studying this content in our online course. Secondly, viewing these videos in parallel to that content. And thirdly, and just as important, you will want to review all of this content with your flight instructor. So what's our topic today? Today, we want to talk about navigation flight planning tools. So you can see this slide in the online course. And the first three tools we're going to mention are the PIM, the flight planning form, and the weight and balance form. Now, when we start to plan the navigation for our cross country, it's important that we use some of the performance parameters of the aircraft. We're going to find performance in Chapter 5 of the Pilot's Operating Handbook. Excuse me. Now, the PIM is the Pilot Information Manual, which is a copy of the POH. The difference, of course, is the POH may have some specific information to that particular serial numbered aircraft, where the PIM is just information in general. So for planning purposes, the PIM will suffice just fine. The next piece, as you can see, is the flight planning form, and we're going to go through that in a little more detail in later videos. And then the third piece will be your weight and balance. Now, we've already talked about and studied weight and balance. So let's look at some of these other flight planning tools. So here you can see a graphic of what we call the chart supplement. I wonder, what is a chart supplement? Could it be a supplement to the chart? You got it. Hey, we name stuff pretty creatively when it comes to aviation. In the chart supplement, you're going to find a lot of information that is way too much to try to cram onto the chart itself. In fact, when you open the chart supplement, it might be a little bit overwhelming, and you say to yourself, oh, well, that's too much, just forget it. Don't look at it that way. Start with the table of contents in the chart supplement and start to break it down logically into the topics that you need specifically, and review that with your flight instructor. For example, you're going to fly to a specific airport. You can look that airport up in the chart supplement and find out a lot more information about that airport. You could find out services available. For example, what kind of fuel does it have, if any? Could I get oxygen if I'm flying an aircraft with an oxygen system? Could I get major or minor maintenance performed? And I can find a lot more information about the runway surface type, the slope of the runway, the composition of what was the runway made of, all kinds of good information in that chart supplement. Next, I want you to be sure to review the chart in detail. Now, you remember from previous videos, we talked about the area chart, the sectional chart, and the WAC chart. For your cross countries in the private pilot course, you're going to work primarily with the sectional chart. Now, you can see here this graphic from our online course. The legend for that sectional chart is a treasure trove. I mean a treasure trove of very valuable and important information. All right, next we're going to talk about two tools that we use to help us plan before and during the flight. The first one is the plotter. Now, your flight instructor will work with you on this plotter. You're going to see two different types of plotters. The one depicted here is a solid piece plotter with a 180-degree circle. Your flight instructor will show you how to line that up on your chart using lines of longitude to help you find your true course. The second type of plotter has a spinning wheel on it. It'll do the same thing, just works slightly differently. They both work fine, and it's just personal preference. Those are our plotters. When you are using this plotter and you're looking at the mileage scale, be sure to look carefully at that mileage scale. Why? Because you'll see on the plotter it has different scales for different charts. Also, most of these plotters have statute miles and nautical miles. Now, you remember from an earlier video, a nautical mile is 1 minute of latitude or longitude. If you said 1 minute of longitude, you are correct. Now, that is a slightly different measurement than a statute mile. A statute mile is 5,280 feet, where that nautical mile is 6,076 feet. So when you look at this plotter, be sure you are using the correct scale. Our second tool is the flight computer. Now, there are two versions to this flight computer. If you've been around aviation a little while, you might have previously owned, or maybe still use, the rotating slide rule, sometimes called the E6B flight computer. We have an example of that here. This flight computer will provide accuracy to the depth necessary for your speed, time, and distance calculations. It might look a little bit intimidating, but it's actually quite easy to use. I can hold it in one hand, spin the dial while I'm still flying the airplane and looking outside. You can review the use of that with your flight instructor. The other one you might try is the electronic flight computer. There's many different versions of that electronic flight computer, and they have gotten easier and easier to use over time. The next thing we want to orient to are the lines of latitude and longitude. Now, if you're following along in the course and these videos, you know that we covered this in a lot more detail in an earlier video. So we just want to quickly review it here. This is an excerpt from a sectional chart, and this is what those lines of latitude and longitude look like. Now, notice when you look at this excerpt, it says Tracy, and you're wondering, now, is that the airport? Is that a VORTAC or a VOR? No, it's not. If you look carefully at our example, Tracy there is an NDB, or a non-directional beacon. Now, we didn't talk a lot about non-directional beacons because the FAA is phasing out their use, but you might still occasionally come across one, so be sure to review that with your flight instructor. The other graphic is just a quick review of lines of longitude and lines of latitude and the hemispheres. Notice lines of longitude from north to south always are equally divided. Lines of latitude, as we go from the equator toward the pole, become smaller and smaller circles. So if they're equally divided, the further north we go, the smaller those divisions get. Also review this red line here in our example running through Greenwich, England. Do you remember what that's called? And if you said agonic line, you're correct. Now, the last thing we want to review as we plan for navigation are time zones. The planet Earth is divided up into 25 different time zones. Now, you can see an example of those time zones here in North America. North America, the continental United States, or sometimes called the lower 48, covers 4 separate time zones. You can see those color-coded. Now, I'm going to ask you something, and I'm wondering if you have ever wondered about why those time zones are divided up the way they are. Well, if you take a look at this chart and compare it to a sectional chart, what you're going to see is those time zones are approximately 15 degrees of longitude apart. Why is that? Now there's a question to ponder. And the answer to that question is because the planet Earth rotates at approximately 15 degrees per hour. Now, when pilots use time zones, we reference Greenwich Mean Time, sometimes called Zulu time, or UTC time, that's Universal Time Coordinated. Remember from an earlier video, we talked about why the agonic line, or 0 degrees, runs through Greenwich, England. Those time zones are measured from UTC, and you can see in our chart here, the Eastern time zone in standard time is +5, Central +6, Mountain +7, Pacific +8, as we move further and further west from the UTC, or Greenwich Mean Time reference. So that just about wraps it up for planning tools. Here's a quick review question. If I were interested in finding out information about fuel and maintenance services available at an airport, what navigational planning reference might I go to? And if you said the chart supplement, you got it. Well, folks, those are navigational planning tools. Join us next time.